I'm in my late 20s, and as of late, I've been traveling quite a lot. So I've grown accustomed to booking accommodations through Airbnb and sites like that, enjoying the unique experiences and personal touches that they often provided. But one particular stay will forever change my perception, and since then, I haven't traveled nearly as much. The Airbnb listing appeared promising, a charming, century-old house nestled in a quaint neighborhood. The host Susan seemed warm and welcoming in her messages, assuring me of a comfortable and pleasant stay. Eager to explore a new city, I arrived with high expectations. Upon entering the house, immediately I noticed a peculiar draft, as if the air whispered secrets. But dismissing it as just an architectural quirk, I brushed it off and I settled into the cozy living room. As the evening wore on, I became aware of faint, muffled sounds, like soft footsteps and hushed conversations. It was as if the walls had ears and they were alive with clandestine activity. Curiosity gnawed at me, urging me to investigate further. So late at night, while the world slumbered, I tiptoed through the house, following the trail of noises. I pressed my ear against the walls, listening intently. To my horror, I discerned hushed voices, muffled cries for help, and the rustling of bodies concealed within the very structure of the house. Dread washed over me, realizing that the listing's description was a facade, a deceitful veil hiding the presence of unknown occupants within the walls. Panic settled in as I grappled with the implications of my discovery. First, who were these people? What were they doing? And most importantly, where were they in the house and why were they in the walls? Fear compelled me to contact the host Susan, who initially feigned surprise and assured me that it was a misunderstanding. But her tone was laced with an unsettling calmness that sent shivers down my spine. It was clear she knew more than she was willing to disclose. Desperate for answers, I reached out to Airbnb's customer support, recounting my chilling encounter. They promised to investigate, ensuring me that they would address the situation promptly. But as the night wore on, my unease grew, overshadowing any sense of security that their promises may have offered. That night, I lay awake, every creak and whisper amplifying my dread. The veil of normalcy had been lifted, and the walls had seemed to close in, suffocating me with the weight of their secret inhabitants. The sleep eluded me, my mind haunted by the thought of hidden eyes watching my every move. As dawn broke, I decided it was time to abandon the treacherous confines of that house. I hastily packed my belongings, my heart racing as if pursued by unseen specters. The moment that I stepped out, relief had washed over me, yet the experience had left an indelible mark on my psyche. In the aftermath, Airbnb assured me that they had taken appropriate action, severing ties with the deceptive host and pledging to enhance their security measures. I tried reaching out to the local police as well, but nothing ever came of it. I honestly don't know if the host just had a family or something living in a secret part of the house, or if something much more sinister was going on and I had unexpectedly stumbled into it. A little bit of backstory. I had just finished high school and had recently turned 18 when all of this occurred. I was looking forward to starting university and was going to move out of my parents' house into student housing closer to the campus. As a result, I started looking for a job closer to my residence. I found one about a 5-minute walk from where I was going to be living, and it was perfect for me. I was to be a barista in a tiny little coffee kiosk on one of the coolest streets in the city. This street was sort of known for prostitution and drugs, but it was also super popular as it hosted some of the most interesting events and also contained some of the nicest thrift stores in the city. What was even more ideal about my new job was the fact that I worked right across the road from my best friend, Let's call her Phoebe. At the time, Phoebe was in love with her job. She was actively being given more responsibilities and she was being promised the world by her employers. Many of these promises turned out to be false at the time, but that's another story. During one of her shifts, Phoebe was approached by a man who had seemingly become a regular at the place that she was working. We'll call him Richard. He told her that if she ever wanted to leave her job, he had just become the manager of a new restaurant a little ways down the road. Phoebe kindly denied his offer. He approached her several more times with this same offer before she recommended him our other close friend. We can call her Mia. Mia was hesitant to take the position at first because she had a passionate hatred for hospitality and greatly prefers retail, but she did need the extra money at the time and she took the job. The day that Mia was signing her contract, Phoebe and I both finished work early around 4. So we told Mia that we would meet her at her new job once we had finished, and then we would go and do something after. Phoebe and I went to the cake shop next door and sat outside her work while we waited for Mia. When they finished, Richard followed Mia outside to come say hi to Phoebe. The girls introduced him to me and a conversation ensued. He seemed like a friendly guy, if not a little bit awkward. He was late 30s, early 40s, bird-like in appearance, quite short, balding, larger in size, and he seemed very greasy. As the conversation continued, I began to tease Mia a little bit as friends do. I saw no harm in it, as she was one of my best friends and she had made a similar joke at my expense prior to this interaction. Richard's demeanor suddenly seemed to switch. He became somewhat catty in defense of Mia. He retorted back that if I was going to be mean to his staff, that he would bar me from every store in the street that we worked on. This seemed ridiculous, but he claimed to be friends with the security guard that worked in the street. I actually was friends with this man, and when I asked him about it, he told me that he had never heard of Richard before. Richard said these things to me as though he was joking, but he was so persistent about it that I got incredibly uncomfortable and I wanted to cry. It was from this interaction that he nicknamed me Trouble. I also feel it needs to be noted that he didn't scold Mia or Phoebe at all for the same behavior. Phoebe sensed my discomfort and told me that we had to leave as we had plans. Flash forward a few weeks and Phoebe and I decide to go see Mia at work again. Richard intrudes on our conversation yet again, and again he singles me out from the group, teasing me and only referring to me as Trouble. This time I just play along as I can tell it isn't going to stop. He asks Mia if she is after another job as he needs someone to clean his home, and lives all the way out to where my parents and Mia live. Mia tells him that she can't as she already has too many responsibilities. But I tell him that I might know a few people in the area that might do it, and I give him my phone number. Richard takes this as a sign that I have agreed to do it myself, and begins texting me incessantly about setting up a meeting. This man is much older than me and lives alone in a rural area. Suddenly, my instincts kick in, and I try to get out of it by telling him that I can't drive. He says that he can pick me up from the nearest train station. I don't want to come across as impolite or have my best friend's boss resent her because of me, so I make the mistake of agreeing. However, I tell him that my sister will be helping me as she is looking for a part-time job, and my dad will be dropping me off. I do this in order to have some backup and so that my dad knows my whereabouts. Richard goes on to complain about how I don't trust him, and claims that his house is very small, and the $100 that he's going to pay me won't be enough to split with my sister. I tell him that I just want to provide her with work experience, and finally agrees, asking how old she is. My sister is 17. Richard and I finally find a time that I am not working to schedule a meeting. This meeting is held at his place of work, and I feel a lot more comfortable sitting in the main restaurant surrounded by people, as I thought he was going to hold a meeting in an office. We begin talking about the responsibilities of the job. He tells me it'll be basic things like tidying up, vacuuming the usual. I agree, and he then goes to tell me that he will also be expecting me to do his laundry. I think this is a bit odd, as he's only paying a small amount for such a large job. He assures me his house is small and not that messy, but continuously claims it just needs a woman's touch. I nod and ignore the fact that this grown man thinks that, just because he's a man, it means he doesn't need to know how to maintain his own home. Now, this is where things start to get creepy. Near the end of the meeting, he asks me again how old my sister is, and when I say 17, his face drops. He then starts telling me about how he previously posted this ad on Craigslist, and this 60-year-old woman replied offering to do it in her lingerie. He tells me how he didn't even ask for that in the ad, but she had offered and he was put off completely. He then proceeds to tell me that he would be willing to pay more to someone between the ages of 18 and 30 if they were willing to do that, but he would never request that because he's not a pervert. I call BS at this and tell him then and there that this meeting is done, and that I have to go and meet Phoebe. He asked me if he had made me uncomfortable. Well, yeah, you did. But I say no on that. I'll get back to him. This strange man, who I have only met 3 times, then attempts to hug me, but I ignore it and awkwardly wave goodbye from less than 3 feet away. I boost it down the street to Phoebe's work and tell her the whole story. She tells me that I can't do it, and I tell her I know, but I don't know how to tell him that without risking my own safety or me his job. Fortunately, Richard gives me the perfect out. He texts me later this afternoon telling me the hopes that I am okay with cats because he is a small one. I see this as the perfect opportunity and lie to him, telling him that my sister and I are both deathly allergic, and neither of us will be open to doing the job. Richard accepts this reasoning after a little persuasion, and I think that I'm finally done with him. Unfortunately, that was not the case. Richard proceeded to text me every day asking if I'm mad at him, or if he had made me uncomfortable, asking me how my day was and so on. Just behaving like a preteen in a new relationship basically. And the more that I ignored him, the more he texted. I finally blocked him in March of 2019. This escapade had begun 4 to 5 months prior to this. The blocking didn't stop him though. Mia informed me that Richard was no longer going to be working there, as he had to go in for surgery and we wouldn't have to see him anymore. You see, Richard hadn't only been harassing me, but to Mia and Phoebe too, just to a lesser extent. One Saturday morning while I was working, setting up at around 7:45, Richard showed up at my work. The divider was down as we were closed, though he came and stood in the doorway, the only exit that I had available to me at the time. He started asking me why I was ignoring him and telling me about his surgery. I told him that he wasn't allowed to stand there as it was a fire exit, but he didn't budge. Fortunately, my boss showed up shortly after and told Richard that he was going to phone the security if he didn't move. My boss was kind of an ass on most days, but holy crap, was I grateful for him that morning. Roughly a month after that experience, I thought Richard was gone from my life. I was living in my new apartment. Mia was around all the time and loved her job without Richard there. Things were going well for us. One morning after a night of drinking, me and the flatmates became peckish. I decided to order us some greasy food on a food delivery app. Lo and behold, guess who our delivery driver is? Yeah, Richard. I turned to my boyfriend at the time and tell him that he has to go collect the food. He doesn't understand, but Mia assures him that it's important. He agrees and goes out to collect it. Richard is not driving the vehicle he claims to be driving in the app, and at first we're confused. Plus, the number plate is also different. Mia and I watch from his bedroom window, and the interaction takes much longer than expected. He comes back and we ask what took him so long. He tells us that Richard refused to give him the food until he could prove that he was my boyfriend. He had recognized my name from the app and now he knew where we lived. Me and I tell my flatmates the story of what happened, and we all agree that it's a good idea to go to my RA. The RA reports it to upper management, and they say they can't really do anything about it, but if he comes in again, to call their security. A few months go by and there are no Richard sightings until I order from the same app again. Yet again, Richard is our driver, and yet again in a different car. I send my boyfriend to go collect the food again and report the incident to my RA again, and the food delivery app. I know that I was stupid in not immediately reporting it to campus security, as I had much more proof of the creepy behavior than he had of his innocence, but I was naive, and I didn't want my parents to find out about it at the time. Fortunately, I haven't seen Richard since then. This is the scariest thing that has ever happened to me, and what makes it worse is that, had things gone down differently, I might not have been here to tell the story. Okay, first things first. I'm a girl about 5'7" and around 130 pounds. This happened to me about 3 years ago, when I was in my early 20s and still a student living in a very safe area. Growing up, I had loved martial arts, and having grown up in a small rural town, I would take what I could get. Karate, fine. Judo, sure. Kung Fu, why not? Taekwondo, sign me up. I loved martial arts and I still do, because they help me discipline my body and mind, and grow my confidence. It had been a few years since I had moved out to my country's capital to study, and I had kind of fallen off the martial arts wagon at that point, with college taking up most of my time. I should also mention that at the time I lived with my younger brother and our cat. We lived on the first floor, the second floor for all my American people, right next to a military camp in a patch of forest which leads to a creek. On our back balcony, there was a circular metal ladder that would lead up to our balcony, and the kitchen door, which of course we always kept under lock and key. Except for when my cat wanted to go out. Then we would unlock the door, and he would go down the outdoor metal stairs to find his cat friends and play. I commuted to my college every day by walking 30 minutes to a bus stop, and then riding the bus for an hour and then walking another 10 minutes until I made it to campus. And when it was time to go home, I would have to do the same thing all over again. So, as you can imagine, it was very tiring. I would be out of the house every day from 10 in the morning until almost 10 at night, so when I had come home, I'd be knackered. I don't believe in premonitions much, but I do believe in instinct, and for quite a while, I felt like something was up with that patch of forest behind our apartment. I felt watched. Maybe it was the blackness of that patch of forest that made me feel uneasy, because there wasn't a single light there, and the outdoor ladder looked like it descended into an abyss. You could take 3 steps into that patch of forest and you would be under complete cover of darkness. It made me feel weird, because even though I couldn't see anything, I knew that something was up. I had no proof, but I knew it. I was in class one Wednesday afternoon with my best friend at the time, and a professor came in to pitch an internship to us. Internships aren't very well known in my country, so professors actually have to argue their case about why, as students, we could benefit from this. My best friend, I'll call her Kay, was very interested. But when the professor listed off the requirements, she realized that she couldn't apply, as her GPA wasn't high enough. This led to Kay having a crying fit after the class was over, which led to a panic attack. And it got so bad that she called her boyfriend to come pick her up from campus. And since I didn't want to leave her alone, I stayed with her until her boyfriend showed up, and got in his car with her. The conversation in the car was basically me and her boyfriend trying to console her and help cheer her up. I asked her if she would like me to go over to her place so we could all hang out, but she said that she was okay, and didn't want to put me through the hassle of commuting home the next day. She lives a full hour away by car, so 2 hours away by public transport. So it was decided that they would drop me off at my house and they would go to theirs. When we get to my house around 7 p.m., a full 3 hours before I normally come home. I hug her, tell her to text me if she needs anything. I thank her boyfriend, and get out of the car, glad that I'll be home early for a change. I went in through the main entrance, climbed up these stairs to the first floor and put my key in the lock. I opened the door and called out to my brother's name, like I always did, but I got no response. The house was dark except for one light in the room where the front door had opened to it, and it was eerily quiet. I felt my stomach tie into a knot because even if I couldn't hear anything, I could feel that someone was there. And when my instincts talk, I listen. I turned right into the hallway that leads into our rooms, and saw my brother's door slam shut hard as soon as I got in the hallway. My brother's room was on the end of the hallway on the left, facing my own room, which is on the right of the hallway. My first thought was that my brother had taken a shower and forgotten to get a towel, so he made a run for it from the bathroom, which is next to my room, in embarrassment. But then I heard muffled whispers coming from his room. They sounded hushed and pressing. I still had no reason to be afraid, but I was on high alert, because I thought my brother and his friends were planning on jumping out of his room and scaring me, and I wasn't about to let them get the satisfaction. So I inched down the short hallway, through the darkness, and before I knock on my brother's door, I take a look at my room. It was a complete mess. My mattress was off the bed. My clothes and my books were all over the floor. My jewelry box was empty and thrown on my bed. All in all, it looked like a tornado had gone through there. And the hushed whispers in the next room sounded extremely pressing and anxious now that I was close. Because though I had tried to tiptoe as silently as possible, my steps had been audible. I realized what was happening, and I went ballistic. At that moment, I freaking lost it. My fight or flight instinct kicked in, and it kicked fight into maximum overdrive. The words danger, thieves, fight hit me like a truck, and I threw my whole weight on my brother's door, bursting that door down so furiously you would think that it owed me money. I saw no one in the room, but it was also a mess and I knew what I had heard, so I ran to the balcony door. I ripped the curtain out of my way and went through the open balcony door just in time to catch one of the thieves right after he had jumped off the balcony ledge. Looking back on it, he looked like a normal guy. Black hair, normal height, athletic build, big earring on his left ear. But at the time, he looked like a freaking monster to me. A vile, putrid, home-invading monster. I started screaming unintelligible things as I saw him stumble around, obviously having hurt his legs, before he got back on his feet and ran away. They were gone. I was safe, but then it hit me. Where the heck was my laptop? I ran into my room and tore the place apart looking for it. It was gone. I started screaming and crying. The unfairness, the audacity, and the cowardice hit me like a steel toe to the stomach. I screamed and cried like I was a Grecian tragedy. I am not rich by any means, and neither is my family. I had an old laptop which was probably worth pennies secondhand, but I needed the laptop for my schoolwork, and without it, I couldn't finish my semester. Not to mention that I don't have many real-life friends, and the majority of my friends at the time were online, so if I lost that laptop, I lost them too. My laptop was lost, and so was I. I felt violated, dirty, and less than. I was afraid that I would throw up or pass out or both. I was taking such rapid and deep panic breaths that my vision began to blur. In the most panicked and grief-stricken state I'd ever been in my life, tears streaming down my face. I called my mother to tell her what had happened, and she told me to call the police. It took me almost a full minute on the phone with the operator, telling her again and again where I lived, who I was, and what had happened, before she understood me and said that she would send someone over. A few days later, I was talking with my mother about the incident, and she told me something that hit me hard. I come from a pretty trilingual household, and she told me that when I called her that night, She couldn't make out what language I was speaking because I had been so panicked. It makes sense why I had to repeat myself over and over to the operator. I started running around the house like a lunatic, checking every door and every lock in a frenzy, until I got to the kitchen and saw that the window had been broken. Without thinking, I slammed it shut. Stupid, I know, but I was beside myself. I wasn't thinking straight. My brother came home a few minutes later, and when he came in, he saw me panicked, crying my eyes out, and speaking almost unintelligibly. He came to the bedrooms and he saw the damage, and told me to go sit in the living room and calm down. I did as he said, and I tried to calm down, but I jumped at every sound, and started crying worse, telling him that I was sorry that I got home too late, that our laptops were gone. The dark house seemed so big to me at those moments, so lonely, so hostile, and I felt so small and helpless. My brother called me over to my room and showed me a pillowcase full of something. When we looked inside, we found both laptops, all of my jewelry, fake, all of it, my old phone and some other stuff. They had been right in front of me the whole time, but I was so messed up that I didn't even register it. The police eventually came about an hour later and did pretty much nothing, so my brother and I took it to the police station and filed a report of the incident. And since I had seen half of one of the culprits' faces, they asked me to come in for an identification. They even sent over someone to dust for fingerprints. Nothing ever came of it. The police said that since they didn't even have a backpack to put the loot in, and resorted to using one of our pillowcases, they were almost 100% junkies. We had the outdoor metallic ladder ripped off our kitchen balcony, much to my cat's displeasure, since that's how they got in. And we also installed several motion detecting lights. For the next few months, I was constantly on edge, and every time I passed near some suspicious characters who hang around near my usual bus stop, I felt a violent rage boil in me. I caught myself looking for the man that I had seen, ready to beat him within an inch of his life. But I never saw him again, or heard his creepy whisper partner again, and my brother and I moved away from that apartment a few months later, because I just never felt comfortable there again. I picked up kickboxing, and because it has made me stronger, it has helped me feel safer. And I also always carry a knife with me now. I still think back to that encounter and realize how stupid I was. What creeps me out the most is knowing that that night, there had been nothing but a thin plywood door separating me from two potentially dangerous men. Even if I know that me busting in my brother's room like a lunatic is what scared them off, because how stupidly fearless I was, I also realized how bad it could have gone. They could have had weapons, they could have had knives, they could have had pepper spray or a chain or whatever, and there were two of them and only one of me. And if they had ganged up on me, even with the adrenaline having turned me into Doom Guy, I don't know how much of a chance I realistically stood against two men, high on whatever they were on, and desperate enough to break into an apartment and stuff loot in a pillowcase. Had they been willing to put up a fight, this would have ended very, very bad for me. What I do know is that I probably still would have busted in there like Doom Guy. So, to the creepy, cowardly people who dared break into my apartment and tried to rob me and my brother and ended up traumatizing me so bad that I had to move, screw you both. I hope for your sake that we never meet again, because I've been kicking that sandbag for 2 years now and picturing your face every single time.